Shabbat Shalom. There are several famous exegetical stories about revelation, about Matan Torah, about the receiving of Torah, that show just how complicated the receiving of Torah was for our ancestors. And often these stories are conflated, which I think is okay, because it makes the narrative even stronger. So the essence of the story is that before God presents the Hebrews, right? Before God presents the Hebrews with the Torah on Sinai, God first goes to all of the nations of the world and says, here is my Torah, here is this great gift, do you accept it? And nation after nation asks in return, well, what's in it? To which God lays out a series of different mitzvot, which are systematically rejected by the nations. And finally, God comes to Am Yisrael, God comes to the people, Israel, and presents them with the same offer. This is my Torah. Will you accept it? And the Jews, like every other nation, says, no. But then, God turns Sinai upside down, holding the mountain above them, and says again, though this time not as an interrogative, but rather as an imperative, accept my Torah, or here under this mountain will be your burial place. So then we say yes. We accept. Now there's a lot to unpack here. Theologically, philosophically, psychologically, but we're going to save those conversations for another Shabbat morning, the conversations about coercion or force into the covenant. Because this morning I want to talk about the aftermath of that great cosmic moment. How the world changed, how all of us changed when we became keepers of Torah. Because after that moment, a word entered into the world that we have been trying to figure out ever since. And that word is chosenness. What exactly does it mean to be chosen? To be carriers of Torah. To be tasked with partnering with the Almighty. Now, one thing that the great majority of our rabbis, thinkers, and sages seem to agree on is that one thing that chosenness doesn't mean is favoritism. That built into this beautiful and complex legal theological system of ours are numerous things. But among them is not an idea that we, the Jewish people, are better than the other nations, held in higher regard than the other nations, or even destined for some ultimate redemption to the exclusion of everyone else. Chosen, according to our tradition, does not mean favored. What it means, at least what I would argue that it appears to mean, how about that for a Jewish sentence? What I would argue that it appears to mean is responsible. Chosen means responsible. When we receive Torah, that day and every day after, we were asked or commanded to be responsible. To be responsible for keeping mitzvot, for remembering and guarding sacred time and space, and, this part is crucial, assisting God with an ongoing process of creation. That is chosenness. To build Torah in the world, to safeguard it and sanctify it along with the things that Torah holds dear that exist both in time and in space. Okay, so new, what's your point, Rabbi? We have to build Torah, we have to do mitzvot, we have to keep in the process of creation. Got it, great, let's daven Musaf and let's go have lunch. Here's why I think it's important. Here's why I think it's important that we discuss this concept of chosenness. Because despite what we may want, or think what we want, Judaism, Shabbat, this whole idea of ethno-religious peoplehood is not built on an idea of relativism or escapism. The point of Jewish life, the purpose of Torah, the great theological objective that we are pursuing is not, and this might seem like an audacious position, the objective is not individual happiness. The point of Judaism, the purpose of Torah, is individual and communal responsibility to build goodness, peace, and dignity in a world that will and does actively reject that goodness, peace, and dignity. Let me say that again because I think it's important. The purpose of Judaism is not individual happiness. The purpose of Judaism is foundationally communal and built upon an idea of doing very difficult and sometimes seemingly impossible work for the betterment of all of God's creation. And hopefully, happiness, meaning, comes from that letting go of the self for the greater good of creation. So what does that mean? It means God went to every nation in the world and said, here is an almost Sisyphean task to carry with you for the rest of your existence. Are you up for it? And ultimately, because we were last, because Sinai was held over our heads, that task has fallen on us. We get to be Sisyphus. That's scary. That might seem like a bummer sometimes. And what else does it mean? It means that Jewish life, while it is filled with so much joy, so much meaning, so much beauty and depth, also by definition comes with some discomfort, some heaviness, an obligation to tackle some things that we might not want to tackle. I know that seeing Rabbi Starr's topic for his wisdom and coffee this morning brings up visceral responses in people. I know that the idea of talking about women's reproductive rights in shul or from the bima elicits strong reactions from lots of people's kishkas sitting here this morning, or maybe intentionally choosing not to sit here this morning specifically because of those kishkas rumbling in them. And I know, because I have been told, that one of the things some folks dread when there is another mass shooting, when more innocent lives are tragically lost, is that the rabbi will take the opportunity that Shabbat to talk about gun violence, mental illness, or the plague of hate in our world rather than find some interesting nuance in the Parsha. I know that. And trust me, I would much rather talk about an interesting turn of phrase in the Hebrew of Parashat Mishpatim, or a particular comment from Rashi that I think gives a pasuk in the parasha a new or different spin. I'd much rather do that. And don't get me wrong, there are definitely times to do just that. But this morning, I think our chosenness asks us to have hard conversations. I think our chosenness means acknowledging where there is hurt, where there is pain. Because we can't build, we can't take on responsibility, we can't partner in creation without seeing that hurt, without acknowledging that hurt, without owning some responsibility for that hurt. Not guilt, but responsibility. I'm not going to talk this morning about Michigan State. And I'm not going to talk this morning about reproach Shabbat. I've given those sermons already. Too many times I've given those sermons. But this morning I am thanking Rabbi Starr for teaching a difficult topic this morning. And I'm thanking Rabbi Starr and our synagogue leadership for keeping our attention on the disease of gun violence that exists in our country. Because I think that having those conversations, even when they're tough, especially when they're tough, when they're uncomfortable, is what we are required to do as Jews, as chosen people. We talked this morning before our services started as we explored the Parsha about this case in Parashat Mishpatim of what it means to be an Eved, to be a slave who chooses to remain a slave. And the Torah puts them in a very interesting position where that slave has to go to the liminal space of the house, to the doorposts of the home, and is pierced through the ear in the doorway. That space is very intentional in Jewish text. The doorposts of our home where we keep our mezuzot, the doorposts are neither going nor entering. They're stuck. They're in the middle doing nothing. For that slave to choose to be a slave to someone else, the Torah argues, is for them to forever be in limbo, to stand in the in-between. As free people, as B'nai Chorin, as Jews, we are not permitted to stand in the in-between. We're not allowed to stay in the doorpost. We have to move. Throughout our history, as much as we have celebrated our peoplehood, our tradition, our history, our invaluable contributions to this world, we have also said in each and every generation, please, please go choose someone else. And it's fair. Because as the Yiddish saying goes, there's my friend Ann Baruch, we say this all the time to one another, es ist schwer zu sein a Yid. It's hard to be a Jew. It is. And it's fair to want out sometimes. It's fair to want to take a day off from seeing the meshugas of this world, but you know what? What makes this so special, what makes this chosenness so amazing, is that none of this falls on individual hearts or shoulders. It's Parashat Shkalim. All of us contribute. It's an us thing. It's a we thing. We are in this chosenness together. Family. Through all of it. When I spent my year in Israel during rabbinical school, I spent every other Shabbat at Kibbutz Hanaton in Emek Yisrael in the Jezreel Valley. And I'd take the bus Friday mornings and take a late bus back to Jerusalem, Motzei Shabbat. On one of those bus rides back home, I was sitting next to a young couple holding a newborn baby. They kept looking at me and whispering between the two of them, and then the young man turned to me and said, Slicha, excuse me. I know this might be strange, but we're very, very tired. We haven't had a chance to rest in a long time. I was wondering if you wouldn't mind holding our baby for just a few minutes while we both take a quick rest. Only in Israel. Only Jews. And you know what? I held that baby for an hour on the way home. Because that's what family does. We hold on to the things that need protecting. And we never let them out of our sights. Sometimes we need to hand them off for a little bit just to get our strength back, but never do they leave us. And so on this Shabbat, Repro Shabbat, Shabbat after another tragedy, we hold on to the things that are important, even when they're hard, especially when they're hard. Because that's what Torah is. That's what we agreed to do. Because we are us. Because we are family. Because we are chosen.